At my $520,000 beachfront mansion, my daughter-in-law's family had moved in. Her father yelled, "This is my house, get out." I walked in with a man in a suit, and the room fell silent. After 2 weeks at a wellness retreat, I walked into my own living room to find my daughter-in-law's father standing there with a beer in his hand and mud on his boots. He barked at me, "Get lost. This is our house now." My son just stood there, silent. I didn't say a word back. I just pulled out my phone, opened my smart home app, and let the house speak for itself. "Get out of here. This is our place now." Those words didn't come from a stranger, but from my daughter-in-law's father, a man named Bill, whom I'd barely met. He was standing in the middle of my living room with a wide stance and a cheap beer, while my expensive hardwood floors groaned under his filthy work boots. I'd just gotten back from a peaceful 14-day trip to a spa resort in coastal Maine, looking forward to the quiet of my $520,000 beachfront mansion, the home I'd worked so hard to keep after my husband passed away. Instead, the place looked like a frat house. Empty chip bags were everywhere, random suitcases blocked the hallway, and the stale smell of cigarette smoke hung heavy in the air. My daughter-in-law, Tiffany, was lounged across my designer sofa, painting her nails like she owned the place. She didn't even look up while her father kept ranting. My son, Cody, was standing off to the side, staring at his shoes with his shoulders slumped, a total picture of defeat. He didn't say a single word as his father-in-law tried to kick me out of my own home. I felt a sharp pang in my chest, but it wasn't sadness. It was pure disappointment at my son's spinelessness. I'm Martha, 68 years old, and I've survived enough storms to know that screaming doesn't solve anything. I looked Bill right in the eye without blinking. I took in every detail: the open patio door, the blatant invasion of my private space, the total lack of respect. Instead of getting into a shouting match, I simply turned around and walked out. Bill laughed triumphantly behind me, thinking he'd scared me off. He had no idea that my retreat wasn't a surrender. It was the start of a very cold calculation. In my head, I was already checking my bank balances and my smart home login. If they thought a widow was an easy target, they were about to find out how disciplined I can be. The battle for my castle had begun, but it wasn't going to be fought with words. I sat in my car parked a few blocks away watching the security camera feeds on my tablet. It was both fascinating and sickening to see how these people had spread out across my property. Tiffany had already started packing my heirlooms into cardboard boxes to make room for her own cheap knickknacks. Cody was actually helping her. That was the moment the last spark of motherly indulgence died out. In this world, you usually hope people act out of common decency, but when that's gone, you have to manage them through logistics. My first move was small but effective. I picked up the phone, but I didn't call a lawyer. I called the local catering service that had daily deliveries scheduled for the new house project for the upcoming week, ordered by Tiffany on my dime, of course. "Cancel everything effective immediately," I said calmly. Then I logged into my bank account. Cody had a joint credit card for emergencies, which he had clearly been using to stock Bill's pantry. With 2 clicks, I set the limit to $0. No big drama, just the soft click of a keyboard. That evening, watching Bill stand fuming in front of a grocery store because none of the cards worked, gave me a deep sense of inner peace. I checked into a nice little boutique hotel nearby and paid in cash. I didn't need a fight. I just needed distance to plan my next moves. The next morning, I would walk back into that house, but not as a victim. I'd already made a call to an old friend who specialized in home security systems. This wasn't about changing locks anymore. It was about total resource control. If they wanted to live in my house, they'd play by my rules or not at all. The trap of convenience was about to snap shut. The next morning, I walked back in using my spare key. The mood inside had shifted. Bill was cursing in the kitchen because the fridge was empty and the internet was down. I'd simply disabled the router via the app. "Martha, what is going on?" Tiffany snapped the moment I stepped into the hallway. "Our cards are declined, the Wi-Fi is dead, and the food delivery never showed up." I took off my coat and hung it neatly on the rack, pushing aside one of her plastic raincoats to make room. "That's unfortunate," I replied shortly. "Maybe it's a sign you aren't welcome here." Cody came out of the living room looking pale. "Mom, Bill and his wife need a place to stay. Their house is being renovated." I looked at my son like he was a stranger. Then they should find a hotel they can afford, Cody. Bill stomped into the hall, his face beet red. Listen here, lady. We agreed we're taking the upstairs. Cody said it was fine. I corrected him instantly. Cody is a guest here. I am the owner and I haven't signed a single rental agreement. I walked past him into the kitchen and started making tea as if no one else was in the room. The silence I projected was more unbearable to them than any screaming match could have been. I ignored their existence entirely. When Tiffany tried to drag me into an argument, I only responded with cold facts about house rules. I started using my phone to drop the thermostats in the rooms they had occupied to 60 degrees. Since it was a modern encrypted system, they couldn't override it manually. As night fell and the house grew cold, I heard Bill's wife start to whimper. It was a faint sound that told me the siege was working. I retreated to my master suite and locked the door. Tomorrow, I'd take the next step and it would hit them right where it hurt their egos. On day 4, I called a professional cleaning service. I didn't hire them for the whole house, though strictly for my bedroom and my private bath. While the crew worked, I sat in the garden reading the paper. Tiffany came out fuming. Why aren't they doing the kitchen? It's a pigsty in there. I looked up over the rim of my glasses. That's your mess, Tiffany. I'm not using the kitchen as long as you're squatting in it. I've been eating out. It was the truth. I treated myself to a wonderful breakfast at a local cafe while they were inside wondering how to get through the day without cash. I could feel the tension rising. Bill tried to intimidate me by standing uncomfortably close while I was in the garden. We aren't leaving. Forget it. We have rights. I folded my newspaper and stood up. In this house, Bill, there is only one right, the owner's. Since you have no lease and aren't paying a dime legally, you're just visitors whose visit has expired. I went inside and began systematically moving my most valuable possessions, the crystal vases, the silver, the small antiques into my private office, which I'd secured with a new electronic deadbolt. Cody tried to play peacemaker. Mom, don't be so hard on us. We're family. I stopped and looked at him sternly. Family doesn't rob each other, Cody. Family respects boundaries. You allowed these people to desecrate my home. In that moment, I realized I had to teach Cody a lesson, too. He'd forgotten what it meant to take responsibility. I handed him a piece of paper. It wasn't an invoice, but a breakdown of the utility costs for the last week. If you don't pay this by tonight, I'm cutting the power to the second floor. It's on a separate circuit, as you know. His face went ashen. He knew I wasn't bluffing. True to my word, at exactly 8 p.m., I flipped the breakers for the upstairs. The top floor plunged into total darkness. I heard Bill cursing upstairs and Tiffany screaming that this was an outrage. I sat downstairs in my brightly lit living room listening to classical music. It wasn't cruelty. It was consistency. I'd given them every chance to act like guests, but they acted like occupiers. Cody came downstairs with a flashlight. Mom, you can't do this. Tiffany's afraid of the dark. I didn't even look up. I just turned the page of my book. The psychological effect of the darkness was massive. Without lights or heat upstairs, they all huddled together in the small guest nook on the ground floor. But I had throttled the water pressure to that area. It was down to a pathetic trickle. If they wanted to shower, it was going to be a long, cold process. What kind of person have you become? Tiffany hissed at me as she walked past to grab a blanket. A person who protects her property. I replied calmly. I could feel Bill's resolve starting to crumble. He was the kind of man who was only tough when he was basking in someone else's comfort. The next morning, the atmosphere was below freezing. Bill's wife started packing her bags. I can't take this anymore, Bill. This isn't a vacation. It's torture. Bill tried to calm her down, but his authority was shot. He promised they would live like royalty here, and instead, they were sitting in the dark and cold. I went into the kitchen and fixed myself a huge breakfast. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon wafted through the whole house. I didn't offer them a bite. It was harsh, yes, but it was the only language they understood. If you aren't willing to work for your keep or show respect, don't expect to be fed. On the 6th day, I changed my strategy. Instead of ignoring them, I started preparing the house for showings. I called a realtor, an old friend, who showed up with official-looking documents and a photographer. "What's that guy doing here?" Cody asked, sounding panicked. I'm thinking about selling the place or doing a long-term lease. I said, loud enough for Bill to hear in the next room. It's too big for me alone, and since I can't get any peace here, I might as well take the cash and move into a smaller condo by the lake. That was a direct hit to Cody's expectations of a future inheritance. The realtor started taking photos of the rooms, including the ones where Bill's junk was piled up. We'll need to clear this out. It's ruining the curb appeal. The realtor told Bill dryly. Bill snorted with rage, but the sight of a man in a suit professionally appraising the value of the home intimidated him. Tiffany went pale. If I sold the house, her dream of living in a luxury estate was dead. She finally realized her position of power was built on sand. That afternoon, I was back in the garden when Cody approached me. For the first time in years, he looked like the son I used to know, remorseful. Mom, I'm sorry. I thought we could all live here together, but Bill and Tiffany took it way too far. I looked at him for a long time. It's not just about them, Cody. It's about the fact that you didn't stand up for me. I handed him a key. This is for a small bed and breakfast in town. I've prepaid for 3 days for Bill and his wife. After that, they're on their own. This is my final offer before I officially list the house for sale. He took the key with trembling hands. It didn't take long for the explosion inside. Cody had delivered the news to Bill. Through the closed patio doors, I heard Bill roaring, "You're kicking us out to some cheap B&B. We're family, you coward." Tiffany started screaming at Cody, too. But for the first time, Cody fought back. "It's Mom's house, and you guys are acting like parasites." I sipped my tea. It was important for Cody to fight this battle alone. It was the only way he'd find the backbone he'd lost under Tiffany's thumb. Suddenly, Tiffany stormed into the garden, eyes flashing with spitfire. "You think you've won, Martha? We're going to tell everyone what a heartless mother you are. The internet will know you through your own family out on the street." And I looked at her with total composure. "Do you really think your followers care about the truth, Tiffany? I've documented everything. The unpaid bills, the damage to the floors, your father's threats." I held up my smartphone. "I even have a recording of your father screaming at me the day I got home." Her face went blank. The threat of social shaming was her last weapon, and I'd neutralized it before she could even swing. In this day and age, information is power, and I had more of it than she did. Bill came out huffing and puffing, carrying a suitcase in each hand. He didn't look like a conqueror anymore. He looked like a beaten man. "Come on, Tiffany. We're leaving. This woman is made of stone." I smiled inwardly. Stone is a great material for a foundation. It doesn't give in, and it lasts. They started throwing their things into their car while I watched in silence. No goodbyes, no reconciliations, just the bitter taste of their defeat. After Bill's car screeched out of the driveway, a strange silence settled over the property. Cody stood alone in the hallway surrounded by the remnants of the chaos. He looked at me tentatively. "What about me, Mom?" I took a deep breath. "You're going to help me restore this house to exactly how it was. Every single room. After that, we'll talk." We spent the next several hours bagging trash, scrubbing floors, and moving my furniture back to where it belonged. It was hard physical labor, and it was good for both of us. It felt like an exorcism of the disrespect that had filled the air. As we worked, Cody told me how it had happened. Tiffany had been pressuring him for months, claiming I was lonely and would love the company. He'd believed her or wanted to believe her to avoid a fight. "You took the path of least resistance, Cody," I said as we polished the windows, "but that path usually leads straight off a cliff." He nodded silently. He finally understood that harmony isn't created by giving in. It's created by setting clear rules. By evening, the house felt like my home again. The smell of lemon polish had replaced the stale tobacco. I made a simple dinner for the two of us. It wasn't a feast, but it was the first time in ages we'd sat at a table in peace. "Tiffany's not coming back, is she?" he asked softly. "Not to this house, Cody, and not into my life until she fundamentally changes." I set a document in front of him. It was an agreement for a monthly loan repayment for all the costs I'd covered for his in-laws over the past week. He signed it without hesitation. He was finally starting to grow up. In the weeks that followed, I installed a state-of-the-art security system. Not because I was scared, but because I value my autonomy. Every lock was now biometric. Cody had access, but only during certain hours. I wanted him in my life, but the boundaries had to be physical as well as psychological. Tiffany tried calling several times, probably to apologize or ask for money since Bill's savings were drained by the hotel stay. I didn't pick up. Some lessons have to be learned in the silence. I started filling my house with life again, but the kind of life I wanted. I invited my old friends over for bridge, hosted small book club meetings in the garden, and enjoyed the quiet of my library. My house was no longer a project for someone else to exploit. It was my private sanctuary. Cody comes by regularly now, but he always calls first. He seems more grounded. He took on a side job to pay me back faster. The dynamic between us has shifted from dependency to mutual respect. I saw Bill at the grocery store the other day. He avoided my gaze and rushed his cart down another aisle. He looked old and tired. I didn't feel a sense of triumph, just a deep satisfaction that I hadn't lowered myself to his level. I hadn't screamed, and I hadn't begged. I had simply maintained control of my own resources. In a world that is often loud and chaotic, quiet consistency is the strongest weapon. I bought a bouquet of fresh flowers for my table and drove home to my castle where I truly was the queen. 6 months have passed. My garden is in full bloom, and sometimes I almost feel that Maine sea breeze in my living room, even if it's just in my head. The house is peaceful. Tiffany and Cody ended up splitting up. He couldn't take her constant demands and her total lack of accountability anymore. It was a painful process, but Cody grew from it. He's living in a small apartment in the city now, learning how to stand on his own 2 feet. We have a good relationship built on honesty and clear boundaries. Bill and his family moved away somewhere down south, where they'll hopefully find someone less observant than me. I've updated my will. Cody will still inherit the house, but only under certain conditions that ensure it can never be used as a speculative asset or by people who don't understand the value of work and respect. I've learned that you don't have to be loud to be strong. You just have to know where you stand and be ready to defend the space around you without losing your dignity. Tonight, I'm sitting on my patio watching the sunset. I have a glass of wine in my hand and I've earned it. Life as a widow in this big house isn't lonely. It's full of the freedom to decide how my time and my property are used. Anyone looking at me sees an older woman in a beautiful home, but I know that behind this facade is a woman who successfully defended her fortress, not with an army, but with the power of a clear no. And as the stars come out, I know one thing for sure: this house will always be my sanctuary, a place of peace and dignity. Some people only understand respect once their comfort disappears. I didn't punish anyone. I just stopped letting my own house be used against me.